Good evening and salutations, my GH fans. Wow. You know what? Let's start off with Nicholas. So Nicholas is sitting there talking to Ava, and they're talking about Cyrus and protecting Alexis, and Ava, right off the bat, is like, "This isn't a good idea. This isn't a good idea. You shouldn't be sitting there working with Cyrus because." Julian did that and it didn't really turn out well for him, you know? And so she's against it. Nicholas is for it. Nicholas is like, listen, at the end of the day, I'm going to sit there and do whatever needs to be done to protect my aunt. Now, I've said this yesterday, and I know a lot of people disagree with me as far as like how Nicholas is going about this. Because he's going based off of emotion and he's going off of fear. And the way that he looks at this situation is, well, you know what? If I say no to Cyrus, guarantee something's going to happen to Alexis. Now, if I do something, this may spare her, this may buy her some time. But I know exactly what's going to wind up happening if I don't do anything. So I understand where Nicholas is coming from, and that's why, for the most part, for the majority of it, I was sitting there agreeing with Nicholas. Now, when Martin comes in, Ava gets a text from Laura. And, Laura pretty much is just sitting there saying, yo, you need to make sure that Nicholas does not work with Cyrus. Now, Ava brought up a really good point. And at first, when Nicholas was talking to Ava, and Ava was like, I don't think you should do it. I don't think you should sit there and help, and yada, yada, yada. I'm sitting there thinking, how many times did you sit there and literally go out your way to help Julian with all of his crap? I mean, hell, you're Shadow Woman to save, to help Julian. But you don't want him to sit there and help his aunt? Are you serious? But Ava brung up a good point. And this is something that, yeah, granted, I was overlooking because I was not there thinking about just the immediate threat. Ava was like, listen, if, Nicholas gets back Florence to Cyrus, what else is he going to ask for? How many times is he going to sit there and ask for these things? And sooner or later, you're under his thumb. Well, let's be honest. The first time he does something for Nicholas, he's going to be under his thumb. And that's something that is very true. But, I mean, I kind of look at it and I'm just like, well, what other option do you have? See, this is the thing that I'm sitting there looking at. What other option do you have? Anything short of a bullet from Cyrus, and that's pretty much about it. And I've seen it in the comment section, not just in my comment section, but just in when I watch clips and stuff like that. And people seem to say, no, don't give in. You can't give in to a guy like Cyrus. And I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Because again, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm trying to put myself in Nicholas' shoes, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, what's the alternative? Stay strong, hope for the best. Because the minute that he sees a mark on her face or a broken arm, whatever resolve that they have, whatever resolve he has, is going to be gone. And that's why I think now that I'm thinking about it, the question of the day: what would you do in Nicholas' situation? What would be, what is something that you would do if he came to you and said the same thing? You either help me find my mother, or X, Y, and Z happens to your family member. And let's just put the prison sentence in there because you can't really be, like protecting them and stuff like that. So like, what could you do? Now, I know that a lot of people, at least two people have. I think one of them was Alicia, but I know somebody else was sitting there saying like, you know what? Listen, Nicholas has money. He could sit there and pay to protect, Alexis, and I'm pretty sure Ava, you know, from her old gangster days or whatever. She has some contacts and she has some money and stuff like that. She could sit there and pay for protection and stuff. So, I mean, those are other options. But since I already kind of just threw those out there, and I think somebody else threw those out there, what other things could they do? That is pretty much the question of the day. Um, Now, Nicholas does talk to Martin, and, he kind of gets him to open up. He talks about, the relationship that he doesn't have with Nicholas's mother, and, what he can do to sit there and try to repair that and fix that and stuff like that. And Martin's like, listen, I don't know where she's at. That's the truth of the matter. But he talks about this humming cake, which, not gonna lie, this is the second time he talked about it. And now I'm gonna sit there and try to go through the ends of the earth to find out what this damn humming cake tastes like. Because I love cake. Yeah, he talks about the humming cake and stuff like that in Vermont, or I think that's what he said. And it got Nicholas thinking. Because the last thing that he said was like, I took, some humming cake to my mother when I last saw her. And so, he's kind of using the humming cake, like, where the bakery is at, for a starting point. Now, of course, Laura's not there telling Ava, listen, make sure he doesn't give in to his dark impulses. Make sure he doesn't sit there and work for Cyrus. And I'm just not there. I mean, granted, she did sit there and say, I'm going to talk to the warden and see what I can do as far as helping Alexis out. So I'm like, okay, that's something. It's not much. And she even sit there and said, it's not, it's not guaranteed, but it's something. Now, Anna and Valentina are talking, and Peter shows up. And Peter is all like, well, so here's the thing. How about we just kind of just, piece this out, truth this out, or whatever, just kind of just, whatever. And he comes over there, and he's like, well, Liesl is not there getting this impression that, I killed Franco and stuff, and I wonder where she got that from. And, Anna's like, well, I mean, it's not something that we can forget. And granted, Peter's like, it's my word against yours. And that, I think that's when Anna's like, well, we can't pretend that we didn't hear that. And that's when Peter's like, well, you better for your family and your loved one's sake. And Anna's like, that sounds like a threat. Anna, that's exactly what that was. That was a threat. He literally came in there and threatened your loved ones if you didn't sit there and drop it. So he leaves, and Anna and Valentine start making arrangements and stuff like that, checking on Robin, getting security detail for Brooklyn and Charlotte, and he decides to, Anna decides to call back Peter. He comes back and he's like, so what's up? And Anna's like, so I want to kind of just renegotiate that whole terms that you were having before. And Peter was like, nah, those terms ended when I walked out the house. So, sorry. And that's when Valentine comes down there with the gun. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, what could you do at this point, Anna? Like, you don't have any evidence against Peter. So I guess your plan is to sit there and what? Kidnap him? I guess that's his plan. The problem with that plan is that Peter plan was to poison Finn. He came to the restaurant where they were all staying at. Where they're all staying at. And he talks to the waiter and he's like, hey, listen, you do this for me and I'll help you out with your little, parole thing that's going on. Now, you got Finn, Jackie, Gregory, and Chase. And, I'm sitting there thinking, how are you exactly going to move past this? And Gregory, one of the things that Gregory was saying was like, listen, we can't sit there and bring up the past. We can't sit there and shift blame and stuff. And I'm like, how are we going to get through this talk without shifting blame and drudging up the past? Because you literally can't do that if you're going to actually have a discussion. So, honestly, to tell you the truth, it's pretty much Gregory that kind of leads the charge in this whole thing, because he was apprehensive about doing this thing to begin with. And, even Chase was like, listen, I don't know if I can just take the high road. I just, too many bad things that didn't happen. And at this point, both of them about to sit there and get ready to just get up and leave. And then Gregory talks about the good memories, He basically is like, listen, the past is the past. We can't change that. But we could sit there and focus on the good memories and the good times that they had. And they all kind of agree, and they start laughing, and then they decide to start eating. I'm just sitting there thinking, why did they not start eating before? I know me personally, I'm in a much better mood when I actually have food. I just am. Y'all started doing this whole talking about the past and this whole Maury Povich thing before y'all actually had food. What made y'all... I don't know. That's just my train of thought. But, anyway, they all agree to start eating. And, the waiter comes in with the drinks. Now, granted, the waiter specifically put the cup with the drug in it towards Finn. But somewhere along the lines, I think this was Gregory. Or was it Jackie? It was one of those two. It was like, when you sit there and bring you here all the time, and they had the little spinny thing or whatever. And somebody was like, oh, it's like a little merry-go-round, like you used to always sit there and do this when you were kids and stuff like that, and you would just spinning around and stuff like that, and it was just so funny and everything. And for some odd reason, and this can only happen at this point in time. This is why I kind of love soap operas, but I could just sit there and just kind of laugh at it at the same moment. So, a potentially dangerous drug is about to go into Finn's system. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Somebody could just knock over the cop or whatever. Nah, that would be kind of boring. So how could we make this more interesting? Or we'll have Chase play out his fantasy that he used to have him play out his childhood memory from when he was like 8. Even though he's like in his 30s now. But for some odd reason, this seems appropriate to do. I guess this really does seem appropriate to do. So they all decide to take their cups and they put it on top of the spinning thing. I'm not going to lie. If anyone knows what that's called, please tell me, because I feel like that's going to be a conversation later on down the line, and I would really hate to call it a spinny thing. But they all decide to put the cups on a little spinny thing, and Chase starts, playing around with it or whatever. Now, I'm not going to lie. I was kind of laughing my ass off, okay? Listen, there's certain things that adults do that we all just kind of got to laugh at. I mean, Chase is laughing. Everyone's laughing with him. I'm just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So they spin it around or whatever. Then they stop. And now this poison drink could be in anyone's system. And what I mean by anyone but Finn. Because let's be honest. If it came back to Finn, there would be no point of this whole circus thing. So we know that somebody is going to get poisoned by who knows what. And honestly, to tell you the truth, at this point, this is going to be Peter's bargaining chip. When I was sitting there looking at that scene, I thought about the time that Jerry Jacks, and this is going way back, poisoned Nicholas and gave him the antidote slowly and stuff like that, so that way he can, get control over him and have a place to hide and all other stuff, to have leverage over him. And I feel like this is going to come into play next week. So this should be interesting. Now we're going to kind of get into the, I want to sit there and say eh, kind of the duller part of this episode. Scott does talk to Laura, and he tells her, I don't think Jason did it. I think it was Peter. He tells her all the reasons why it could be Peter. And Laura's just like, I'm not convinced because Ulbrich isn't reliable, and there's 2 eyewitnesses that's saying that Jason did it, even though I don't think that he did it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't really understand. Like, some parts of this conversation, at least for me, doesn't seem like it makes sense. You know that there's a good chance that Jason didn't do it. But you are sitting there saying that you don't feel like you're convinced that Ulbrich is saying that Jason didn't do it and it's most likely Peter. Because Ulbrich isn't a reliable source, but you already think that Jason didn't do it, so I don't really understand. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I think that was literally about it. And for the most part, after that, Scott goes to talk to Jason. And pretty much just says, like, listen, if there's something I can do to help you out, to honor my son, that's what I'm going to do. Now, Carly was there earlier. And once again, we have this conversation. Carly's like, listen, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you out of jail. And that means turning over Florence. Once again, Jason's like, no. I'm not gonna lie, when he said it twice, I did start laughing. But he literally was like, listen, there's no guarantees if we give Florence over that he's going to keep up his end of the bargain. So, Jason was like, listen, the hardest thing for us to do right now is to wait and see how this plays out. And I gotta admit, I mean, I'm not usually on Carly's side to 100% like this, but I do understand where Carly's coming from. Carly's like, listen, there's a lot of bad stuff that's happening now. We need to do something now. Because honestly, to tell you the truth, Carly looks at that like, well, that's a viable option. That's going to fix something now. The problem is that it's a quick fix now, but a problem later on down the line. Carly's not thinking that far ahead. Jason is. I swear sometimes when I watch this show and I see some people underestimate Jason, I'm just like, you do realize that a lot of the times Jason is usually the smartest person in the room. Like, this guy is literally sitting there playing chess with Cyrus, which I find interesting because Cyrus is a lot older. He knows the game as far as like the mob and stuff like that goes. But yet Jason, I mean, granted, this piece kind of fell in his lap because of Carly, but he's playing it towards his advantage. I love Jason. He's just awesome. That literally has nothing to do with the review, but just in general, he's just the man. That's pretty much all I gotta say. But yes, he does tell Carly, yeah, we can't do that. You just kind of gotta just sit on this. Now, Carly does leave because Jocelyn's in the ER because she sprained her ankle trying to go too hard on a volleyball court. And we're going to kind of get to this part. But Carly did sit there and heard that Liz did bring over Jake. And, Jason, told Jake that, he didn't do it. So Carly's like, there must be some part of her that believes you, I guess. Now we're going to kind of get into the other part of this show, which I kind of want to talk about a little bit because this has a lot to do with some of the quote-unquote younger actors of the show and how a lot of times, not that they don't have engaging storylines sometimes, but I feel like a lot of times they're just kind of used as like placeholders, for the more bigger stories to come out, or time for the more bigger stories to evolve. Like, don't get me wrong, they have some interesting stuff sometimes. The Oscar stuff, him dying and the whole grief and everything like that. But then sometimes you get into this stuff where it's like, what the hell is his name? Dev. This whole Dev likes Jocelyn, but Jocelyn doesn't like Dev now. and then Dev acts like a dick, and like all this other stuff where it's just like, all right, this is like, hey, sometimes it's just like I don't really care about this stuff. I'd rather sit there and find out what's going on with Nina and stuff. And we all know how I feel about Nina, but like I would choose, even hear about Nina or her crap because I could sit there and talk about that as opposed to like Jocelyn and Trina. It's just like, I just kind of don't really care, And I feel like a lot of times they're just there as placeholders. And this is where we get into the scene of Jax taking Jocelyn to the ER because she was going too hard on a volleyball card. And the reason why she was going hard is because she told her dad that she got waitlisted and she has to prove herself. At first Jax was like, listen, I'll take care of it. But Jocelyn's like, no, this is, I have to do that, Like, I have to sit there and prove myself. So, they do an x-ray. She says she's fine, but she's going to have to sit there and wait a little bit before she's can volleyball again. But unfortunately, there's, like, scouts and stuff like that. And she needs to kind of, like, make a name for herself while, this tournament's going to go on. So, Carly comes over and, Jocelyn kind of explains, like, they don't really tell her why she was going so hard. And, when Jackson's like, how come you didn't say anything? Jocelyn's like, I don't need, add more worry on her plate between, Sonny and Jason and all the other stuff. She doesn't need that. So, honestly, tell you the truth, I'm not going to lie. I felt like it was just like, all right, well, I just kind of just summed that up real quick. Was there really a need to, like, even have them there? Honestly, tell you the truth, I thought they were going to sit there and talk about Sonny a little bit. I really did. But, of course, he didn't because, whatever. And again, even though I don't like the Sonny side story crap, I felt like that was much more better. That could have been used in the story other than Jocelyn spraining her ankle and her being, rightfully so anxious because, they put her on a wait list. But that could have kind of waited, though. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I think that was about it, except for the fact that Carly did talk to Liz, and, Carly's like, listen, if you think that Jason did, like, if you think that Jason didn't do it, then you need to say something. Which is absolutely true, because here's the thing. While they're sitting there looking at the wrong person, the person who really killed, Franco is just walking free, walking scot-free and threatening people left and right. So, Liz, you kind of need to do the right thing. Just saying. I think that's about it for the most part. I'm going to be honest, this episode wasn't really that great. And even before I started recording, and I was just sitting there looking at my notes and stuff like that, and I'm just like, this episode was just middle of the road, kind of average, And, whenever I sit there and talk about, these episodes, this one was, like, dry, like, really dry. Yesterday's episode was a little bit different because it would just focus on one person. But this episode didn't really bring that much to the table. It didn't really advance the story that much. The only thing that really happened was the fact that only major thing that I felt like really happened was that somebody's about to get poisoned. That was it. Other than that, it was just kind of middle of the road, kind of average. Oh, and Peter is, caught or whatever. Like, they are holding Peter at gunpoint. I guess they're going to kidnap him or something. But besides that, it was like, this episode wasn't really that great. Not going to lie. So whenever I sit there and look at an episode like that, I'm just like, well, how am I actually going to sit there and do this review if the episode was just blah? But then I sit there and think, you know what? A lot of times I do enjoy talking about these soap operas, sometimes more than I do with watching them. And so with that being said, I hope everyone actually enjoyed this review and all that good stuff. With that being said, I'm gonna go. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Stay safe. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. And thank you for writing comments and stuff like that. Yeah, so I want to sit there and say thank you for, writing the comments and stuff like that, because it does really help and shape how I do future reviews. Because there's times where somebody will sit there and write something and I tend to be like, oh, whoa, I didn't even sit there and think about that. So, thank you. And with that being said, yeah, like I said, I'm going to go. I want to thank everyone for watching. Be safe this weekend, have fun, and I will catch you in the next review.